What is up on a Thursday night? Thanks for joining me as always, getting ready for the NFL playoffs. That's right, NFL playoffs coming up this weekend. We have a lot to talk about. Aaron Rodgers, is he going to retire? Is he not going to retire? What the hell's happening with him in New York? The Dallas Cowboys, Mike McCarthy. Is McCarthy going to return to Dallas? Interesting story happening down there. And of course, we've got the head coach carousel that we have to discuss. And we'll also have a conversation about the playoffs coming up this weekend. Before we get started, just thinking of all of those out there in Cali. If you're watching this in California, I know I was out in Sacramento for a little over a year and a half. Just thinking of people. I was in Sacramento, Northern California. The fires are happening more in Southern California, but just thinking of those during this tragedy, just absolutely crazy what's happening. So I hope everybody gets through and everything is okay. Of course, every single Thursday night, I ask the same question. What are you drinking? What are you drinking, my friends? Tonight, I went Oktoberfest Marzen, Berkeley Beer Company. Here you go. There he is. Little German guy on the cover. It's a 5.8 ABV, Berkeley. It is a fantastic beer. It is a fantastic brewery. So here it is. Berkeley Beer Company tonight, Oktoberfest Marzen. Sláinte to everybody. I know Sláinte's Irish. I'm drinking a German beer, but I couldn't care less because it's beer and it tastes good. So everybody enjoy yourself tonight. Got Josh jumping in with a Budweiser. Interesting. We've got Stevie Ray with an ice pineapple cider tonight. Vitalix. Oh, that's not Vitalix. This is Vitalix. Hot cocoa with marshmallows. How about that? What a drink that is on a Thursday night. Ryan Lee all hopped up on Mountain Dew. So glad you guys are in here. All right, let's talk about some football. Let's start with Aaron Rodgers. And apparently Rodgers is trying to make us believe that he could retire. He's contemplating retirement. There's a lot of talk about Rodgers retiring. Rodgers has kept it mostly open-ended about his future. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. First things first, if you're thinking that you might be done, if you play professional football and you think that you might want to retire, you probably should retire because professional football is not a sport that you want to be half in on, right? So if Rodgers is thinking about retirement, if he's contemplating retirement, then that probably means if he is earnestly doing that, it probably means that he's almost done, right? That he feels like he should be done and he probably would be done. Because once you start to think that way, you're getting closer and closer and closer to the end, and you probably should hang it up because are you thinking of that as you play? Are you putting yourself in harm's way because you're not just playing freely and allowing yourself to do what you do best? So if you're thinking that you might be done, you're done. Now, if Rodgers is truly undecided, then he should pull the plug. That's what my advice would be to him. And I know it's tough, playing the game he loves, grew up playing, all that stuff. I get it. But if you're really thinking about the idea that you're done, you are done, you should pull the plug. Until he retires, I think this is a leverage play. And maybe I'm wrong on this, but I always look at Aaron Rodgers and I always think he's up to something. I always believe that he's trying to create leverage for himself to put some, pressure on somebody somehow, some way. And I think this is a leverage play to the Jets. I think he wants to know what the Jets are going to do this offseason. I think he wants to know who the head coach is going to be. I'm sure he wants to put some pressure on that. He might even want to know who the GM is going to be. But I feel like this Rodgers retirement stuff is to try to gain leverage on the New York Jets and try to force the action, right? What is your plan? Tell me what your plan is. If you don't want to tell me what the plan is or I'm not part of the plan, then let me know right now because I want to get out. And maybe he wants to create interest from other teams, other coaches looking at this situation in New York and saying, maybe we could go at Aaron Rodgers and maybe trying to create that pressure on Woody Johnson and the rest of, that franchise. They don't really have a front office. They don't have a leader in the front office right now, but maybe he's trying to apply pressure. That's the way I see it. He's trying to force the hand of the Jets to make a decision and to say, okay, are you going to have me here? What is this team going to look like? And give me these answers so I can then react and do what I've got to do. which would lead to the question, what kind of market does Aaron Rodgers have? Do you think Aaron Rodgers has a big-time market? I don't think so. He's on the books for a ton of money. He is known as a malcontent at this point, not the smoothest locker room leader, as we know, right? So is he really somebody? I mean, he's preaching before the season of taking this seriously, and he's preaching about winning football, and you've got to want to win. You got to take it serious. And then he's skipping mandatory minicamp to take some random vacation in Egypt. Does that sound like somebody who is, a leader of a locker room? Not to me. I think he's a hypocrite. He's a malcontent. He's a hypocrite, and he's 41 years old. So I don't know how many teams would be jumping at the chance to trade for Aaron Rodgers. I don't see it. I don't see it. Zach Coward, Blizzard of Hops. Interesting. Where's that from, Zach? Let me know. The Blizzard of Hops. Michael Skinner says strawberry lemonade. Don't hate it. Kevin Roberts, Red's Apple. I haven't had a Red's Apple in forever, Kevin. I haven't had that in forever. Now I want to try it. I want to try some Red's Apple because it's been a long, long time. All right, before I get to story number 4, we're done with Rodgers. That's enough on him. Don't forget to do a few things to help out this program, to help out this YouTube channel. I say it every week. I try not to spend a lot of time on it. Doesn't take money, doesn't take much time of yours to do this, but make sure you click that thumbs up on the YouTube channel. The more likes means more eyeballs. That's how we get the algorithm active here on YouTube. So don't forget to press that thumbs up button and give us that like. Throw a comment in. Let me know what you're drinking. Let me know how you're feeling on this Thursday night. Getting ready for playoff football this weekend. I'm getting ready for Notre Dame tonight. We'll see how they do against Penn State. So don't forget to like, don't forget to comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Trying to get to 5,500 subscribers. We're at like 5,260 or so. So let's keep pushing along on that. All right. Before we get to story number 4, let me jump to a super chat here from Pete. Vrabel sounds all but guaranteed, but just hypothetically, what if Vrabel and Ben Johnson go elsewhere? Thank you, Pete. Of course, Pete's talking about the Patriots and the fact that Mike Vrabel interviewed with the Patriots earlier today. Apparently that interview was in Boston. Mike Reese of ESPN saying that, one possibility is that's where Robert Kraft lives, one of his estates. I think he said Chestnut Hill. So maybe that's where the interview took place. It does feel like Vrabel is all but done. And it almost seems like a fait accompli for everybody else across the league feeling like it's done, like he will end up with the Patriots and be the next head coach of the program. If it's not Vrabel, then, of course, they're interviewing Ben Johnson, who you bring up. They're interviewing Johnson tomorrow via Zoom. So that's fun. Little Zoom interview, little pandemic action. What happens if they don't get Vrabel or Johnson? I would imagine that they would jump back in to this search, which really hasn't been a search. They'll jump back in. The first name on my list that I'd be looking at is Brian Flores. They have not contacted Brian Flores. Is that because they don't want to insult Flores, knowing that they want Vrabel and they have a relationship with Flores? So if you reach out to him and then in the 23rd hour, right before interviewing him, you announce that Vrabel's the next head coach, and you kind of make Brian Flores look a little silly. So maybe they don't want to contact Flores unless they know that they're super serious about it and they really want to bring him in. But Flores would be the next guy on my list. And then after that, it gets a little dicey. It gets a little dicey. Maybe Liam Cohen with the local angle from Warwick, Rhode Island, and, has done a very good job as the OC in Tampa to work with Drake May. Maybe he would be on the list as well. But thank you, Pete, for the $5 super chat. It is much appreciated. James Maloney says, Nick, my man, you've been crushing it. Loved listening to you and Bedard on 98.5 last week. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I'll be back on 98.5 on Sunday afternoon, 2 to 5:30 with Mark Dondero. All right, let's get to story number 4. As I drink my Oktoberfest Marzen from Berkeley Beer Company. Let's get to story number 4. What will the Cowboys do? What are the Cowboys going to do with their head coach? Now, Dallas didn't let Mike McCarthy interview with Chicago. Chicago put a request in for McCarthy. It took Dallas a few days to answer back, and Dallas said, we're not going to allow you to talk to our head coach. So that was shut down. Meanwhile, you've got McCarthy's contract expiring in 5 days. His contract is officially up on January 14th. So we've got 5 days until his deal is done with. and then nobody has to ask for permission, right? It's rather obvious that Dallas said no to Chicago because A, they're still talking to McCarthy, and B, the hope would be let Chicago interview everybody else, and then by the time Mike's contract comes up, we might not have to worry about the Chicago Bears because possibly they found their guy. But Dallas has 5 days left on this McCarthy deal. And what do you think is going to happen? I think he's going to come back. I think McCarthy is going to stay in Dallas. I think he returns. Why I feel that way, several reasons. The Cowboys, if you're going to say goodbye to McCarthy, then why would you wait until, January 14th, middle of January, late January? Every day that goes by that you still have McCarthy as your head coach under contract is another day that you cannot interview somebody to replace McCarthy. Like if you're the Cowboys, would you not be going after the bigger names, the better names, the best names in this hiring cycle, right? If you're Dallas, aren't you looking at Mike Vrabel if you want to move on from McCarthy to set up an interview with Vrabel? Aren't you looking at Ben Johnson to work with Dak Prescott? Aren't you looking at Aaron Glenn? Aren't you looking at Flores? Aren't you looking at Liam Cohen? So leaving the door open for all of these guys to interview and find other jobs is not a smart move. I think if Dallas was done with McCarthy, we would already know it. At least that would be the smart play. Like, why would you drag this on? You're just losing the opportunity to talk to other head coach candidates, right? So that doesn't add up to me. It doesn't add up. And if you look at Jerry Jones, right? If you look at Jerry Jones's history, we know what Jerry's about. I mean, he kept Jason Garrett in Dallas forever. Should have fired Garrett well before he did, but he kept Garrett there. Jason Garrett was a very loyal guy. He was certainly a Jones guy. And so when you look at the history, Jerry Jones doesn't love saying goodbye to coaches unless that coach wants to fight Jerry Jones, which was Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson wanted say in personnel. Jerry Jones wanted to call the shots. Goodbye, Jimmy. So he likes the Jason Garretts. He likes the Mike McCarthys. He likes head coaches that don't get in the way. Mike McCarthy is not going to get in the way. He's just not going to do it. He's not going to go to Jerry Jones's office and say, Jerry, I think you got to do this. That's not going to happen. You can call him a yes man, but he's just going to go. I think that's what Jerry Jones prefers, and that's why I never thought that the Bill Belichick thing would work when everybody was talking about it last year. And really, Mike McCarthy, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. He didn't do a bad job this year. I'm not a McCarthy guy, but he did not do a bad job this year. He was 7-10, and they had a bunch of injuries, including to Dak. It was somewhat messy there for a stretch. He's a lame duck coach on the final year of his contract. To go 7-10 wasn't too bad. But if you're Dallas, what you got to wonder is Mike McCarthy the head coach version of the quarterback dilemma? And what I mean by that is when you have a good quarterback, not a great quarterback, it's tough to say goodbye to that quarterback because you don't know if you can upgrade. It's difficult to upgrade. It's difficult to upgrade on average quarterback play in the NFL. And if you take the risk and you say goodbye, you go out there, you find somebody who's not as good, now you're kicking yourself in the tuk-tuk. So, McCarthy's good. I don't think he's great. But is he just good enough that you're concerned that if you say goodbye to him, that you won't find somebody that is better than he is? All right, we'll get to story number 3. I want to talk about the head coach openings. I'll rank which opening I find the best of the job openings. Should be a lot of disagreement, possibly, maybe. But I am drinking a Berkeley Beer Company Oktoberfest Marzen. Here it is. It's a fantastic beer, 5.8 on the ABV. Tricky move around the microphone. Was able to do it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to like over there at Facebook and like on Twitter as well. Always appreciate that. Let's jump to another super chat before getting to story number 3. Ryan, thank you for the 5. Nick, does Vegas worry you at all with them firing Tom Telesco when it comes to Vrabel? I was hoping Patriots would lock him down tonight. Couple things here, Ryan. Again, thank you for the 5. What I would say about Vrabel is this. Vrabel has known for months that Tom Brady and Richard Seymour would be out there in Vegas, right? He's Brady's friend. He's friends with Richard Seymour. Everybody knew that Brady was going to own a slice of the Raiders. Everybody knew that Seymour would own a slice of the Raiders. But yet, over the last few weeks, we have still heard consistently that Vrabel favors the Patriots job and the Patriots favor Vrabel. So Vrabel knew this was going to happen. Now, did he know that they were going to blow out Tom Telesco? I don't know. I'm not sure if he knew that. But he knew that Brady was going to be there, and he knew that Seymour was going to be there. And I'd imagine that Vrabel knew if he talked to Tom and he talked to Seymour and they got to Mark Davis, that Vrabel could get them to say goodbye to Telesco, which happened today. Is it possible? Of course it's possible. Anything is possible. Brady, Seymour, they have that relationship, right? I'm sure Vegas will pay decent money for Vrabel. It's nice weather. It's a beautiful stadium. I still would say that Vrabel is more likely to end up in New England. And I start with the quarterback. Vegas doesn't have a quarterback right now. Yes, they could trade for J.J. McCarthy. They could possibly sign Sam Darnold if Minnesota doesn't do that. They could try to trade for Darnold if he gets tagged. They could try to do certain things. I guess they could try to trade for Aaron Rodgers. But if you're Mike Vrabel and you're looking at this, the Patriots already have Drake May. You know what you're working with Drake May. You talk to Vegas, it's going to take multiple moves, right? It's going to take them to find that quarterback. It's going to take them to be able to actually execute and bring that quarterback in. Maybe they can try to trade up to number 2 in the draft and draft a Shedeur Sanders. Maybe that would be their plan. Maybe that is what they would pitch to Vrabel. Does Vrabel like Shedeur Sanders? I don't know. Does Vrabel like Drake May more than Sanders? Does he like Drake May more than Darnold or McCarthy or any other quarterback that Vegas could possibly get? So you've already got Drake May. You've already seen Drake May play. You know how Drake May handles himself if you're Vrabel. You've been paying close attention because the Patriots is reportedly the job that you want. So I think that the Patriots still have the upper hand. As far as tonight, I did not think it was going to happen tonight, and it might. It still might. We still might get word that, Mike Vrabel is the new head coach of the Patriots. We still might get that report at some point tonight. But I would not expect that. I think they want to at least interview Ben Johnson. And I think especially the way that this process, quote unquote, has gone, I think they want to at least give the perception that this wasn't an inside job, that it wasn't decided weeks ago, even though a lot of people that have been reporting on this would tell you that it was very, very likely, if they fired Mayo, that Vrabel would be the guy, and they knew that weeks ago. But I think the Patriots want to give off the perception that that wasn't necessarily the case. And so if they interview Ben Johnson, then it looks a little bit better for them that they interviewed the other top contender in the hiring cycle. So I don't think that they would put out that Ben Johnson interview for tomorrow morning if they were going to tonight say we've hired Mike Vrabel. I don't think that would look great. It would kind of chop Ben Johnson off at the knees. So I think they'll go through the Ben Johnson interview tomorrow. It is slated to be tomorrow morning. I would not be surprised if the Patriots tomorrow afternoon or tomorrow night, tomorrow evening announced Mike Vrabel is our new head coach. So I still think the Patriots have the upper hand on Vegas. Vegas is certainly a possibility. But I think if you look at all the national reporters and the local guys and women as well, everybody is telling you that Vrabel's going to end up with the Patriots without directly telling you, which means they have a lot of information that is telling them that that is the most likely result here. So we'll see what happens if it unfolds that way. I think it is going to unfold that way. I have felt that for the last few days and am not moving from that. I think we find out about Vrabel tomorrow afternoon, evening, night. And if not, then maybe Monday or it gets leaked out over the weekend. All right, let's get to story number 3. Story number 3. Have a sip of whatever you're drinking. And what are you drinking? I want to know. Throw a comment in. All right, let's take a look at the 6 openings. You got Vegas, you got Jacksonville, you got Chicago, you've got New England, you got New Orleans, you got the New York Jets. How would you rank those 1 to 6? What's the best opening to you? What's the worst opening to you? Some surprising news is Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen in New York. They were not fired, so the Giants are keeping status quo. Meanwhile, you've got Indianapolis standing by Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard as GM. The Miami Dolphins are deciding to, hold on. They've decided to hold on to Mike McDaniel. So how would you rank the openings? Like if you were a head coach prospect, a head coach candidate, and you were listing the teams you'd want to go to, how would you list them? Here's how I would list them. Let's start with 6. I would start with the Jets. And the reason I'd start with the Jets is Woody Johnson, number 1. I don't trust ownership. I don't believe in ownership. I think he's a terrible owner. He meddles way too often. So I would not want to do the whole New York experience with Woody Johnson as the owner. I just would not be in on that. I also don't know what's going to happen with the quarterback. Do I believe in Aaron Rodgers? I do not. So if I don't believe in Aaron Rodgers, who's going to be the quarterback? How are you going to get that quarterback? So I think the Jets are 6 for me. 5. Number 5 for me is the New Orleans Saints. Again, I start with the quarterback position if I'm a head coach, aside from the ownership. And I look at the Saints and I say, who's the quarterback? Yes, you could roll Derek Carr out there, but do I think Derek Carr is the long-term solution? I do not. Meanwhile, the Saints are also in just terrible, terrible cap shape, just brutal cap shape. So are you going to be able to spend money? Are you going to be able to move money? As far as the talent that's on the roster, who do you have to cut because you got that money mess going on? So I got the Saints at 5. I got the Jaguars at 4. Trent Baalke scares me. He is the GM. Shad Khan has kept him on. I don't think that means that he is necessarily going to be the GM when the football kicks off in September later this year. But if I'm a prospective head coach and I'm walking into that office to speak with Shad Khan, I want to know about Trent Baalke because he just hasn't done a good enough job. You also have to ask yourself if you're sold on Trevor Lawrence. He's now 25 years old. He's been in the league for a few years. Do you think Trevor Lawrence is going to be what he was supposed to be? So how do you feel about that guy? Got to throw a Maryland comment out there when she's checking in from Thailand. 7 a.m., coffee. No coffee here at 7:22 p.m. Eastern time. Thanks for joining us, Maryland. Thailand, how about that, huh? All right, job number 3. The Raiders. I put the Raiders at 3. This is a theme. Who's the quarterback? How are you going to acquire that quarterback? How much power does Tom Brady really have? I would want to know the power structure within the Raiders, right? Obviously, Davis is the owner, but how much say does Tom Brady have? Who's going to be the GM? Can I bring my own GM? Does Brady want to have a heavy hand in all of this? If he does, will that get in the way of the GM that I want to be actually making decisions? Or maybe I want decisions to be made on my desk. So what's the ownership amount of meddling in Vegas? Who's going to be the GM? How much is Brady involved? What is your quarterback plan? They do seem a little reactionary. They fired Antonio Pierce on Tuesday after he spoke to the media about the offseason, which is just a really strange look. You also had the fact that they fired Tom Telesco today, a couple of days after they fired Antonio Pierce, which is another strange look because they stood up there and said, hey, you know what? We're gonna keep good old Tommy Telesco. And then 2 days later, whoop, he's out. All right, job number 2 for me. And I'd also wonder about how much money Mark Davis is willing to spend out there in Vegas. He's not as rich as other owners. Job number 2 for me is Chicago. They've got a ton of talent on that roster. They've got Caleb Williams. I have some questions about Caleb after this year, but as far as his makeup and is he a true leader in the room? But, he's incredibly talented. So they've got a lot of talent on that roster. They've got the quarterback. What I would want to know is what is the dynamic between Kevin Warren, the team president, and Ryan Poles, who is the team's GM. What is that dynamic? Who's getting the call? Do I trust either of those guys? The top job, and I've said this for the last, couple of weeks as it looked like Gerard Mayo was likely out. I do think the top job is New England because you have Drake May at quarterback. You know who that guy is going to be, right? You've seen him play this year, so you know who's going to be the quarterback. And if he plays well, he's going to be the quarterback for the next 10 to 15 years. You have a lot of cap space, a lot of money to spend. You've got the most cap space in the NFL, as a matter of fact, for this offseason. You've got a top 5 pick. You've got a bunch of draft capital. You have, I think it's 4 out of the top 77 picks in the draft. You have 5 of the top 105. So you have plenty of draft capital. And you have an ownership group in the Crafts who do not meddle in football, and they have a stated desire of winning. And they're telling the public on record that they're willing to do whatever it takes to win. So I think it would be New England at the top. New England, Chicago, then the Raiders, then the Jaguars, then the Saints. And then you've got the Jets at the bottom with the Woody Johnson factor. Just not a big fan of that. All right, don't forget to, as we get ready for story number 2, don't forget to like, don't forget to comment, don't forget to subscribe. Those 3 things don't cost a penny, and they help me, they help us an awful lot. We continue to build this community if you do those things. So don't forget to click that thumbs up button on the YouTube channel. If you're watching on Facebook, give us a like. Twitter, same thing, hit the like. And also enjoy the beer as you throw a comment in, or whatever you're drinking. It could be cocoa with marshmallows. It could be Diet Pepsi. It could be lemonade. For me, it's an Oktoberfest. I bought a lot of Oktoberfest. I got to drink it. It's January. All right, let's get to story number 2. Let's talk about some of the top playoff storylines. As an NFL fan, what's the top storyline to you? As we get ready for the postseason, what are you most interested in? I have to start with Lamar Jackson, because I think one of the biggest questions of this postseason is whether or not Lamar will finally get there. Will he finally get it done? He's been an MVP. He's played at a top level for a number of years now, but he has not been able to finish the job. Some of that has to do with him. Some of that has to do with the roster. Some of that has to do with, Zay Flowers fumbling at like the 1-yard line last year against Kansas City. Something's out of his control, right? But can Lamar Jackson finally get it done? Can he get to the Super Bowl? Is this the year for Baltimore? If you look at DVOA, if you believe in that analytic, which pretty much takes out all like the weird factors and averages things out across the league, Baltimore had the 7th best team in DVOA history this year. So if you go off of the DVOA analytic, Baltimore's a top 10 regular season team of all time. That's how good they've been this year. That's how good they are. So was this the year? Derrick Henry's been unbelievable. Lamar's put up MVP-like numbers, just crazy numbers. Zay Flowers is going to be out this weekend. But my top question about this postseason is whether or not it's finally time for Lamar Jackson. Does he leapfrog Mahomes? Does he leapfrog Josh Allen? Does he make that move? Does he get to the Super Bowl? Is he able to get to that big game? Second question for me is Philadelphia. Can Philadelphia win it all? They are one of the most talented teams in football. Many would tell you that they might have, that they have the most talented roster in the game. I think, it's between them. Detroit also has an incredible roster. Baltimore's very talented. But can Philadelphia win it all? Jalen Hurts coming off a concussion. Looks like he's going to be okay. He will play this weekend. But Nick Sirianni, to me, is the biggest question about the Philadelphia Eagles. They're talented enough. There's no doubt they're talented enough on both sides of the football. But Nick Sirianni, to me, is still volatile. And I'm not just talking about his personality. He's volatile as a coach. He makes a lot of weird decisions. And as great as Philly has been during this regular season, I think if you're an Eagles fan, and they got to a Super Bowl a couple years ago, right, against Kansas City, but if you're a Philadelphia fan, I don't know if you're comfortable with Nick Sirianni yet. I don't know if you trust him. I wouldn't trust him. I think you're one bad Sirianni decision away from having an early exit in the postseason. So will Philadelphia be able to get there? Will they be able to finish the job, so to speak, with Sirianni as their head coach? Another big question. Can Kansas City do it again? Are we going to see a three-peat? Will Kansas City win their 3rd straight Super Bowl? Monumental challenge. We hadn't seen a team repeat since 03-04 with the Patriots until the last 2 years with Kansas City. Will they be able to do it a 3rd time in a row? Travis Kelce is not the same guy. Mahomes had a quote-unquote down year in some categories. But I still think that Kansas City is as dangerous as they've ever been. You've got Andy Reid, you've got Spags, you've got the team's experience, you've got Mahomes. They're as dangerous as ever. But can they finish the job? Can they go 3 in a row? That's a big question. Who is Green Bay? Do you like the Packers? Do you love the Packers? Do you question the Packers? Who are the Green Bay Packers? Christian Watson out now with an ACL, so he's done. Jordan Love is dinged up. He's got an elbow issue. And the thing about the Packers is you look at when they've played some of the best teams this year, they've lost against good teams. I mean, they lost both games within their division against Minnesota and Detroit. So they played those teams a combined 4 times. They went 0-4. They lost to Philadelphia. So how good is Green Bay? Is Green Bay truly a top-tier team, or is Green Bay more kind of in the lower portion and not necessarily capable of going on a run, because when they play some of the best teams, they tend to lose? Again, lost twice to Minnie, lost twice to Detroit, and lost to Philly. So those 3 playoff teams, you went 0-5 against those 3 playoff teams this year. So what is Green Bay? Can Matt LaFleur get the best out of them? Is this Buffalo's year? That's another question I've got. As much as I talked about Baltimore, is this Buffalo's year? Josh Allen, offensive coordinator, Joe Brady have a great relationship. They have worked very well together. And Buffalo is a very tough team because they're very good on both sides of the football. They can defend, especially with Matt Milano back. And offensively, they can run against you with Cook. They obviously can throw with Josh Allen. Allen has just continued to get better throughout his NFL career. Amari Cooper has done a good job jumping in on that team since the trade deadline. You've got Keon Coleman, who can make some plays on contested catches. Shakir is a good football player. So you look at their tight ends. So I think Buffalo, they're a very talented football team, more talented than I thought they would be. Honestly, I thought they would take a step back this year. I've got egg on my face. It's all good. I'll just drink an Oktoberfest for it. But you look at what Buffalo's done this year. They're a serious threat to Kansas City, and they're a serious threat to any team in the NFL. Of course, inevitably, if Kansas City makes the run to the AFC Championship game, the question will be, can Josh Allen and the Bills go to Kansas City and win? We remember that unbelievable game from a couple of years ago. Can Buffalo go to Kansas City and beat that team on the road to get to a Super Bowl? Is this the year for Buffalo? The AFC is so interesting. You've got Kansas City sitting on the mountaintop going for 3 in a row. And then you've got the Ravens and the Bills, who are just below, very talented teams who are trying to get there for the first time with their respective MVP quarterbacks. Like, the AFC, very, very fascinating. See how it's going to play out. My last question as far as top playoff storylines, my last thought is, can Detroit finish the job? With all of these injuries, with all of the chaos, their offensive coordinator is a top coaching candidate. Their defensive coordinator is a top coaching candidate. They've had roughly 755,000 injuries this year. Can they get through? The Detroit Lions winning the Super Bowl would be one of the best sports stories that we've seen in decades. Can they get through? And you have to also question whether or not Dan Campbell's riskiness, his aggressiveness, is that going to backfire at the wrong time for them? So we'll see what happens with Detroit. All right. Before I move forward with the final story of the week, which has to do with playoff games and how we would rank the playoff games, Oktoberfest Marzen, Berkeley Beer Company, 5.8 ABV, fantastic beer, fantastic brewery. Swing by if you're ever in the Taunton area, Taunton, Massachusetts, right? Taunton's Mass. I should know this. Yeah, Tiverton, Rhode Island, Taunton, Mass. Here it is. Fantastic beer. Hope you enjoy. Go Notre Dame. All right. Like, comment, and subscribe. Let's jump to the final story because Notre Dame kicks off in about 6 minutes. Playoff games. How do they rank for you this weekend? Which ones are you looking forward to the most? Here's how I rank it, 6-1. The game that I'm least looking forward to, I think, is Denver at Buffalo. And you can find interesting things about all of these games. The Sean Payton, Sean McDermott, all that stuff, right? The Sean versus Sean matchup, the battle of the Seans. But I don't see Bo Nix going into Buffalo beating the Bills. I just don't see it. So I'm not super excited about that. Hopefully it's a good game. Number 5 for me is Pittsburgh at Baltimore, which might surprise you. Again, there's an argument, right? Division rivals, Lamar Jackson. Can Mike Tomlin win a playoff game? It's been a while. So there are some arguments for the Steelers at the Ravens, but let's be honest. I think even Steelers fans would agree with me on this. Pittsburgh is just not a fun team to watch. That team is – I watched the game last weekend, that Steelers game last weekend at the bar. My God, that football team is not fun to watch. It's just not. Pittsburgh's not a fun team to watch. The Ravens just beat the Steelers 34-17 3 weeks ago. Pittsburgh is just not playing good football. Not excited about that one. Chargers at the Texans. This is number 4 for me. Neither team is very explosive. You would think about, Justin Herbert and C.J. Stroud. If we said that this was going to be the matchup before the year kicked off, you might be more excited about it. But honestly, neither of these offenses have been very explosive. Bobby Slowick, who was the, as my mom would say, belle of the ball last offseason because what he did with C.J. Stroud in his first year as an OC in Houston. Bobby Slowick is getting dragged by a lot of people down in Houston. They're not happy with that offense. Stroud has not been the same guy. They're not the same team, especially without Diggs and Tank Dell. That's a problem. And Houston, this is like the 7th time. I read it's the 7th time that the Texans have the early Saturday playoff game, wild card weekend. It is a tradition unlike any other. So Chargers-Texans, my 4th favorite matchup this weekend. Next up is the Vikings against the Rams. And this game might be played in Arizona because of the tragic fires out there in California. But this game is sexy. Kevin O'Connell versus Sean McVay, right? You've got, I'm sure the ladies will be not arguing about seeing this game on TV with those two head coaches. But you got O'Connell versus McVay, two very smart, young offensive minds. I think O'Connell's tremendous. I think McVay is tremendous. So this game is a lot of fun. Of course, after what happened last weekend, you have to ask the question whether or not Sam Darnold is seeing ghosts, because Sunday night was rough for Sam. That was a rough game for Sam Darnold. So is Darnold up to the task after what we saw last weekend? Jury's still out. The Rams, by the way, they played the Vikings in October. The Rams beat Minnesota 30-20. 30-20. So I still think the Vikings at the Rams, 3rd best game of the weekend for me. The second one is Green Bay at Philly. Nick Sirianni's volatility. Is he going to try to fight a fan if they're not winning? Is he going to go totally bananas? Is he going to start losing his mind and throw his headset? So Sirianni's volatility. Speaking of volatility, Jordan Love's pretty volatile, right? He'll have hot stretches. He'll look like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Then he'll have a stretch where he doesn't look like he's a good quarterback. He's dealing with that elbow injury. What do you expect from Jordan Love? Jalen Hurts is coming off the concussion. What do we expect from him? And I'd also say if Philadelphia loses, if somehow Philadelphia loses a home game against the Packers, okay? If Philadelphia loses at home this weekend against Green Bay, without Christian Watson, with Jordan Love being banged up, what's the fallout? I would not be surprised. Like, if the Eagles lost this weekend, I would not be surprised whatsoever if Sirianni gets fired. So that's an interesting part of this football game. And the most interesting game to me, and this might shock some of you, is actually Washington at Tampa. I think this game is fascinating. Jaden Daniels, his playoff debut. Baker Mayfield won a playoff game last year. He's always fun to watch, right? He's polarizing at times, but he's incredibly fun to watch. Both of these teams can score. Cliff Kingsbury, Liam Cohen, two of the best offensive coordinators this year for their respective teams. Cohen's been tremendous, especially the fact that they've lost Chris Godwin. So I think Washington at Tampa is a fun matchup, man. Jaden Daniels is just fun to watch. Two explosive offenses. I'm in. Speaking of I'm in on Notre Dame. They're about to kick off in a minute. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to comment. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to enjoy your drink, and don't forget to enjoy the playoff football this weekend. Everybody be well, be safe, have some fun. We will be back next Thursday night to talk about coaches and the I would say the results of this weekend's games and what we got coming up next weekend. So until then, be well. Talk to you soon.